All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting. We were having computer problems, but I seem to have solved them. Just a moment, you're going to see the computer pop up on the screen telling you what seminar you're at. This is Women in Science and Engineering. Women in Science and Engineering is a program at many universities and colleges around the United States which supports students in science and engineering. We're having all kinds of computer fun today. Let's see if we can't get this up on the screen. Now, this is our last seminar of the semester, and we have two engineers visiting with us today who are going to tell you about, there we go, engineering. In the future, we will have more seminar series with guest speakers. We already have this fall's lineup already set. This summer, we will still do some activities but not have any of our seminars. They'll start back up in August. Also in August, we will be starting up with more research opportunities for you in science and engineering. Workshops on careers, resume building, graduate schools, networking for future schools and employment, local excursions, career mentoring. Please take a chance or take the opportunity to look at the website, which is www.brevardcc.edu/WiSE for Women in Science and Engineering. On there you will see all kinds of tools, including funding opportunities, scholarships, mentors that you can contact, and so on. So let me introduce Jenny Lamb and Danny Straub, who are engineers with the City of Melbourne. Thank you. And I forgot to mention, I'm Dr. Ashley Spring. If you have any questions anytime, please ask. Thank you. Okay. You said to stay in this general area, correct? So it could be recorded. Okay. I just want to make sure. My name is Jenny Lamb. I'm the city engineer at the City of Melbourne.
My name's Danny Straub, and I'm the engineering supervisor for the City of Melbourne, but she's my boss.
Try to be a fun boss, but you know, as she said, we both work for the City of Melbourne, and we have some different functions that we do, obviously, and then we also, how we got to our current jobs, a very different way. So that's part of what we wanted to outline today. First off, I just sort of wanted to get a feel from the audience, even though I'm probably not supposed to ask you any questions. How many of you are in your first year or freshman year? And how many are in your second year? And then how many are interested in engineering? And then how many are interested in science? Okay. I just was more curious on who the audience was. We just started going down one path and, you know, didn't consider who the audience was. How did I become an engineer? I have a slide on this one. That's a really good question. When I was, I think, a junior in high school, they were really, back then, eons ago, you know, they really pressed us back when you were a junior to figure out what you wanted to be, what path you wanted to take. And I didn't know. So I asked my math teacher at the time. Not a warm, fuzzy kind of guy, but I liked him. I got along with him. He goes, well, you're good at math and science. Why don't you be an engineer? So here I am today. Wasn't quite that simple, but that's, in a nutshell, that's how I got where I am today. And I don't know how Danny decided to become an engineer, so I'm going to ask her that.
Well, I grew up on a college campus. My father was a college professor. He taught business. And I think he truly thought that I was going to be a business major and I was going to teach, and that turned out to be my little sister. I went to a summer camp, and the first thing they did is they introduced us to a college professor. His name was Dr. Gross, not making it up. And then he said, look, see this barrel over here? This is raw sewage. You get to play with it for a week. I went, ooh, that sounds like fun. I know, I'm strange. But that led me in the direction of engineering. I looked at several different processes and which engineering I wanted to go to, and ended up at the university my dad taught at. and got a degree from there. But that's what started it.
So, I don't know if we want to start now. I think we start with the slides of, okay. I went to the university, well, first I went to, it was called St. Petersburg Junior College at the time. It's changed names since now, similar to BCC. I went there for 2 years straight out of high school, and then I went on to the University of Florida. Go Gators for any of you there. I graduated with my Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Engineering. Now, I started off the road as civil engineering, and I switched partway along the way because I figured I really don't want to build bridges, and I am not into strength and materials. And I looked at the curriculums for the two, and what I thought of as civil engineering is more what some people call sanitary civil or environmental engineering. It was more the water, wastewater, stormwater, that type area of civil engineering. And so I did switch and over to the environmental engineering, and that is what I got my degree in. I also decided that I thought that it would make my course load a little easier, although I probably was mistaken. And I decided to get my minor in business, so I took one business course each semester, and I got my minor in business administration. I think that was about 18 credit hours worth. But I'll tell you what, once I became city engineer, I was glad I had some of that background in the business area. Danny had listed out our core classes and our design courses. I'm not going to run through each and every one, but I do want to point out that one of the classes that I took, is that the next slide? No. I don't know. Okay, one of the classes I took that I still remember today that was, it wasn't my last semester. It was close to my last semester. We had a class that was called Hydrologic Systems Design. You're like, oh, what is that? But it was very hands-on. They gave us basically a survey of a piece of property that hadn't been developed up in Gainesville. We drove out there and we looked at the site, and our professor told us, I actually think that he didn't work for the college at the time. He was a director at St. John's River Water Management District in Palatka. He said, here you go. I want you to lay out a subdivision. I want you to lay out the water, lay out the sewer, lay out the stormwater, fill out a stormwater permit application, and then your final design won't be due at the very, when you would take your final exam. The final design is going to be due about 3 weeks before then, and then we presented them and we sort of compared what other people got out of the course or got out of their project. And some of us had 80 lots and some of us had 5 lots, and it was just very interesting to see that every engineer goes about things differently. And that was probably one of the classes I remember the most, and it sort of related to my job and where I ended up going the most with development review and design. And so, sometimes you take a lot of classes that you don't necessarily think you'll need later on, but, there are quite a few of them that add up to quite a bit. So, and then, did I finish it? Okay. I went on, my last 2 semesters at UF, I was an intern at Jones Edmonds and Associates, and they do have an office in Titusville, I believe. At the time, they didn't. I worked there for about 2.5 years, mainly while my husband was getting his master's degree. Well, I worked there full-time for 2.5 years after I graduated. And I did stormwater design, which you can tell is sort of my favorite area, I guess, is stormwater. But then they got into pollutant mixing zones and some water quality issues. And while I knew that stuff and I could do that work, I really felt like I was starting to get pigeonholed into that area. I was spending lots and lots of hours sitting in my cubicle staring at the computer screen. And I'll be honest, I was starting to get a little unhappy with my choice to become an engineer. And so when my husband graduated from grad school and we determined that there weren't enough jobs in the area for us both to have engineering jobs, that we moved to Melbourne. And I thought about getting out of the engineering field for a while, pretty much the science field for a while. I was without a job for about a month while I was looking, and I just wasn't sure I wanted to continue on engineering. And so then I got a job at the city of Palm Bay as an engineer, and I decided I really liked engineering again. And you sort of wonder, question why. I found what was the best engineering job for me. I found that I wasn't a good engineer to just sit there and stare at the computer screen and manipulate models and graphs and crank out reports. I'm pretty much a people person, and I was having very little interaction with people. And when I went to work for for a local government, I was interacting with developers, with the developers' engineers. I was still being able to design things. I was seeing my designs go in the ground. And to me, I was like, okay, I like being an engineer now. This is my area. And I think that's important, throughout your career. It may not be that you don't belong where the path you chose or the course you chose. It may just be that you need to tweak your job a little if you're able to find out where you do best. I ended up leaving Palm Bay after about 2.5 years to go to the city of Melbourne, and I did that in 1999, and I've been there ever since. And it was a similar job at Melbourne. For some reason, I thought it would be a better place for me, and it probably ended up being right. I don't think that I would be city engineer at Palm Bay right now, but I could be wrong. I started off in what Danny's position is. Things were a little different in the engineering department at that time. I got promoted up to assistant city engineer, and then in 2005, I became city engineer. What do I do on a daily basis? Well, it was easier to define when I was more in Danny's position, but now I do a variety of things. I oversee all of the capital improvement projects that go into the ground in the city of Melbourne. So any water line, any sewer line, any lift station, I'm trying to think, fire station on O'Galley Boulevard, although I'm upset with myself for even bringing that project up because we're having trouble with that project. But any type of construction project that requires engineering in the city comes through our office. I don't work on every single one hands-on and do the design of, but I have to oversee those. I report to the city manager, and I report to city council on what's going on those projects. That, I would say, was probably my main role. Engineering has 21 employees. I only wrote 20 because we're down an employee right now. Also, we review all of the development projects that go in the ground here in the city of Melbourne. Obviously, a little slow on that at this time frame, but like Embraer going in, we review the construction plan. We make sure they're tying in the water and sewer correctly. Also, as city engineer, I'm in charge of the engineering division and then the traffic engineering division. Traffic engineering division is in charge of the signals and the signage in the city. We also do, we'll put the barricades out and so forth for special events. So Melbourne Art Festival or any of the 5K runs, our department's responsible for that. And then we are in charge of the stormwater utility program. Stormwater utility is, I don't think they call it a tax, but it's a separate assessment that pays for water quality and stormwater flooding projects that are in the city. Thank you. We also work on budgets, and we do a lot of customer service complaint resolution in our office. It's amazing how many people will call when we get a happy customer and someone, hey, I don't know what you did on the timing on US 1, but it's a lot better right now. We retimed it about a year and a half ago. We were like, we got a happy call. And, it's interesting what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I'll let Danny talk about how she got to where she is now.
Well, I grew up in Northeast Arkansas. Not a Florida native. Never expected to move to Florida. My parents wanted to move to Florida a long time ago. I'm not a big sand person. I live on the beach now. Oops. I guess I learned to like sand. But I graduated from Arkansas State University. It's in the northeast corner. We're about 75 miles from Memphis, Tennessee. That might be a better location for most folks. I graduated from a real small high school. I was 4th out of 56, very small. My engineering core classes, most of the classes that I had were 30 students, and there were about 38 of us in the degree program at the time I graduated. So I was one of 2 females in the degree program of civil engineering, or the finite of civil, and then there were probably about 15 to 20 of us in the overall 100 students or so in the engineering program. So it was a small university, but widely diverse because we did have quite a few international students. My degree is just a BSc. It's a Bachelor of Science in Engineering with emphasis in civil. Jenny's has very much different classes than I did. My class structure was much more generic. I took a structures class, took a concrete design class, a steel design course, things that very much, when you think of civil engineer, you build buildings. I knew I didn't want to build buildings, but that was the path that was laid out for me. I did several college internships that sort of directed me into, I knew I didn't want to build buildings, but I knew I had to get a degree in engineering to do what I wanted to do. I worked for the highway department. I was a summer intern. I was one of about 30 in the state, and we worked in, I worked at two different offices, a district office in Northeast Arkansas and just a regional office in Northwest Arkansas. And we did survey and material testing, and we inspected construction sites and made sure that the roadways were being built according to the plans and all that stuff. And after my first summer, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to build roads. I had no urge to build a bridge. The road up to it, yes, but I didn't want to be responsible for that thing falling down. My second internship was with a geotechnical firm, which really pushed me even further into wanting to get my hands dirty. I did concrete tests, poured asphalt, took the asphalt core, took soil samples, did nuclear density tests on the subgrade, they were all appropriate. And I learned to love that. I think technically my first full-time job post-graduation was with Anderson. They hired me for about 3 weeks. And then I found a job with a development firm. In Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville is known for Walmart. I designed Walmart all over the U.S. And then some other smaller firms. And then, well, apparently I didn't fit the company very well. I'll admit it. I got fired. 10 months into my first job and I got fired. A little devastating, but I learned to survive. So I started hunting, did a lot of interviews and found a job down here with BSC Consultants. They're out on US 1. And my folks were more excited than I was, I think, that I was moving to a little town on the coast. But we moved down here to Florida, so I was with them for 5 years, I guess 5 years. Jenny started with the city about the same time I started with BSC, so we've known each other in different work environments for a long time. BSC does large and small scale site planning throughout the state of Florida. They also have their own survey crews, so they do all their survey work. Their probably largest development most folks know of is Vieira. Most of the Vieira area was designed by BSC. I then moved to yet another little small engineering firm here in town, and they do a lot of design, but most of their work is smaller sites, small apartment complexes, small banks, daycares, but they have stuff all over site. They're a full engineering firm. They have an electrical, a mechanical, a structural, and a plumbing engineer all in house. So I worked at a civil department, and we did most of the civil work, and then when the building went up, the other guys took over the rest of it. And then almost 6 years ago, I saw the market taking a turn. I also knew that my husband and I were going to want to start a family, and working for the company that I was working for, small children probably wasn't going to work very well. So I started looking, and there was an opening in the city of Melbourne, and that's how I ended up here. So now I get to review BSC's work and CEG's work, so to make sure that they're following the correct code. So, you know, makes life difficult in some cases when you have to tell your former boss that, no, you cannot do that. On top of review, I also manage capital improvement projects. I'm in charge of the pavement management program in the city of Melbourne. So if your street that you live on is not in very good condition, you'll have my email address in a little while. Email me and I'll go look at it and get it scheduled for resurfacing. Also deal with stormwater compliance and our NPDES and TMDL compliance. NPDES is the nutrient national pollutant discharge elimination system. Those are national permits that the state holds as the stakeholder that requires us to reduce the pollutant loading that's entering our water bodies throughout the state. On top of that, based upon the Clean Water Act of 1974, and all of its amendments since then, they, state has a TMDL program, which is a total maximum daily load associated with a water body. But they classify a water body for what it's supposed to be used for. They then decide if it's meeting those criteria, and if it's not, they set a level for whatever those pollutants are that are causing that problem, and then they have to, the city has to reduce those pollutant loadings. So I am working with those compliance issues with the state and trying to get us back into compliance.
And that's a very time-consuming process.
Yes, I have multiple meetings, multiple days of the week, multiple state agencies. So, and then I also deal with customer services. Most of those customer complaints that Jenny has to deal with come to either one of the other engineers or myself. We then determine if we can fix that problem or not, or if it really is a problem. And if there is a problem, we then move up for guidance on some cases from there. So, you start.
Okay. What did we learn in college that prepared us for our current job? Obviously, some of the design work, I sort of touched on that earlier. The stormwater permitting I thought was key. A lot of times in courses you find, you get all the theory and you maybe learn some formulas, but you don't know how to actually put it in the ground. And like I said, pointed out that one class that I had, I was ready to go. But then we also learned, it gave me a good background in what I do now with the lift station design, wastewater collection design, and so forth. The other thing, like with my business minor, I think that it did help with the business principles. And then, mainly I think college helps you with how to research and how to investigate. Sometimes I do feel like I'm a detective in that regard and trying to figure out, well, how did we get to where we are? How did this happen? How do we fix it? The one thing I didn't put on there, I don't think Fanny put on hers, was maybe multitasking. A lot of times, it's very easy to stay on, with one topic and, with the different course load and so forth, you have to be able to work on a multitude of projects at a time, and every day is a constant balance for me.
Because our university was so small, we only had 2 civil professors. So I got the same amount of homework from both professors, and they didn't always talk to each other, so I get a lot of homework. So I learned how to do time management, and I admit my time management skills in college were not very good. That probably reflects very well in my GPA when I graduated. I also learned how to work in a group, and I know that doesn't sound very complicated, but when you have to sit down and work with a group of not only students that you may or may not know, with all sorts of different backgrounds, you have to figure out how you can talk to each other, come to agreement, and then move forward. And we do a lot of that at the city. Sit down as a group, department, come to agreement on something, and then move forward. So I think that was very helpful. And then most of the geotech that I learned. Again, my college course load did not really push me in the direction of being a land development engineer, and that's what I think of myself as. It was more of a structural building type engineering class, and it's just a matter of which degree program you go. So if you have an idea what you're looking for, what you really think you want to do, make sure you look at those class loadings and class requirements, that you're not stuck having to take something that you really may not use, that you may be able to find a different program like Jenny did, same engineering degree, different emphasis, but she was able to find something that it fit her future life much better.
What classes would we have taken? I really wish I'd taken some kindergarten education courses with dealing, and I only have to deal with 21 people. I don't have a very large group, but I really some days just want to tell people, just play nice in the sandbox, please. Can we be nice to each other today? And I wish, and that sort of goes along with the psychology. I mean, trying to get into why people are trying to do something some ways. We don't have a bad division. I don't want to say that. It's just some of the pettiness that happens in an office environment. It's like, I went to school for the wrong thing. To be a better manager, I should learn how to be able to be a kindergarten teacher. Contracts. I wrote courses on contracts. We deal with a lot of construction contracts, and with what we build, we don't build with in-house forces. We build, we contract that out. And I do think that if I had that background, a little stronger background in contracts, that would help me out quite a bit. And granted, we do have people in the city that can cover that, but the personal knowledge of that would help too. I've learned a lot on the job. But traffic design. Like I said, I'm in charge of traffic engineering now. I had no idea I would be going that route. I've been to a couple little seminars and mini courses on traffic, but that is an area that I wish that I had gotten some more information on while I was in school. And then public administration. I shouldn't say this. I have no desire to go back to school to get another degree. I can't imagine doing that right now. Maybe later on I would. If I were to go back to school and get my master's degree, I probably would try to get it in public administration, just because, with being in local government now for almost over 15 years, it could serve me well.
I feel like I should have taken a hostile negotiation class, because when you have a citizen who calls you and tells you this is how you have to do something, and you're like, you can't do it this way. It's unsafe. It's against the law. It's all sorts of good stuff. You have to be able to negotiate with people on a very regular basis. Mm-hmm. Go down. I wish I'd taken more biology classes. I had the option. I had the option of taking biology or geology, and well, geology was a whole lot more exciting than biology. And now working with the TMDL and the NPDS program, they start talking about algae and phytoplankton and seagrass and all that kind of good stuff. I'm like, can somebody just draw me a picture of what it looks like so I can go see? Because I didn't have enough of those classes. I wish I had taken some more accounting and budget classes. My dad's probably yelling at me now for saying that, because he tried very difficultly to push me in those classes, so I chose not to. But because we run on budgets, a very strict budget, we have no option to go over budget in a lot of cases, because the city just doesn't have the funding to pull from. When you're building a McDonald's, you set up a budget and you have more money to pull from the pool. You guess what it's going to be. When you're a city, though, you have this many dollars and that's all you have to spend. But you got to get the road finished. I wish I had taken more transportation courses. They weren't offered at the time, but I wish I had, because I deal with our traffic staff all the time also, and they'll start talking about traffic heads and loop design and making traffic signals work, and I just kind of have to sit there and look at them and go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Draw me a picture. And then another public relations class. I think most people who think they may end up working with the public at some point in time should take a public relations class. You may not use much out of that class, but I really think it's really helpful.
I think both of us have touched on this. I mean, you don't know where you're going to end up. So you can always look back and say, oh, I wish I had taken these other courses, or I had done something differently. And you can sort of steer the ship. I know in this economic time, and when it's harder to get jobs and you may be stuck in a job and feel you can't move, I mean, just stick it out for a while. You may either find you do like what you're doing, or like with me, switching from the consulting side and then going into the local government, I found that made me much happier. So that's something, I don't know, words of wisdom from Jenny or something, I don't know. But the other thing is I forget what other point I was going to. That's horrible. We both talked about some of the courses we would have liked to have taken, and then, we sort of joked around. I mean, I said that makes me happy that I deal with people, even though, we need hostile negotiations sometimes. I mean, if someone asks me, do you love your job? I'm not sure I can answer that. I am envious of people who just come out and introduce themselves. I was at a training program about a month ago, and this woman introduced herself. Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I love my job. And I'm sorry I can't say that. I really like my job, but it's a job. And I know that might sound bad, but I do. I have a family. I have a job I very much enjoy, but I'm just not the kind of person that I don't think there was something else out there that I was meant to do. I mean, I think this is exactly what I was supposed to do. So I don't know. And then since I brought up my family, we sort of get with this being, women in science and engineering. And family plays a big role, not just for women, but for men too. For me, being in government, and Danny touched on this, it does allow a little more flexibility of, having kids, and if the kids are sick and that type of thing. And now I'm, in my position, I'm expected to be there, obviously. Not that Danny's not expected to be there, but, with local government, it's not like you're expected to work 100 hours a week like you sometimes are in consulting jobs. My husband is also an engineer. We met at UF at school. He did go on to get his master's degree. And I have 2 children. Allie, she's not really 9, she'll be 9 on Monday. And Tyler is 4. And they keep me busy. We have dogs. She's one in the family too, so I felt she should be mentioned. And they are my life. Do I love my family? Yes, I love my family. I don't love my job, love my family. But it's very hard to balance work and family. I think it is for everyone. I know, like I said before, because this was for women in science and engineering, I sort of thought we would touch on this a little more. It's a balancing act. I do feel sometimes that my family misses out, or I miss out on my family. I think that's more that I miss out on my family because I get tied up at the office or have to go to council meetings and so forth. But that is part of the job. And like I said, I try to balance it all out. Along these lines, too, when I became city engineer, when I applied for city engineer in 2005, that was a decision that I talked about with my husband because we'd already had one child, and we knew we wanted a second one. And there's a 5-year gap there, and there's a reason there's such a gap there is I knew that I would end up pushing back having my second child if I became city engineer. The first year of being city engineer, the first year of any job, learning the ropes and learning how to do things. Even though I'd been at the city for almost 6 years before that, I still, there was a lot to learn. And so we did put off having our second child that long. So I have young kids for being as old as I am, as old as I feel now. I'm just kidding about that. I am old, but not that old. The other thing too, when you have, most families these days, most couples these days have both families or both members have careers. Both the husband and wife have careers, or both, the spouses have careers. And when Scott graduated from college, the first move was on him. The next move's on me. We've been here in Brevard County for 15 years, so I'm not planning on moving anytime soon. That could change, but we sort of made that deal. And I don't know if you want to add any, we'll go over your personal notes. And
Well, my husband, his name is Mike, and he's an electrical circuit engineer. He designs things in nanometers, and I design things in acres. So sometimes we have relativity problems at our house when he starts talking about how big something is, and he can't draw a picture for me because it's too small. But he's actually from Michigan. He moved down here to work for Harris a long time ago. He's been down here for a long time. But his degree is from the University of Michigan. And we have almost 2 children. Alex is 3 in May, and then we're due with a baby girl this June. And we have a very old cat. I'll admit the cat's mine. It's not Mike's, but he plays with him anyway. But we made the decision when the job opening came open for the city of Melbourne we sat down and talked about it, and we debated for many, many days on if that's something we wanted that I needed to do, not only for myself, but for the family. And it was a decision we did together. He's changed jobs 3 or 4 times and has never changed desk. He works in a field where the company gets bought out quite regularly, and you don't know what actually is going to happen. So we were looking for me to have a stable job. So in the event a layoff occurred, and it did, that we would be able to sustain ourselves until he either found another one or we had to move. And we are prepared. Jenny doesn't like to hear it, but our family is prepared that if Mike needs to move to another job, he can move. The advantage of working in a government like I do now and having the consultant is I can get a job just about anywhere. Everybody needs to build roads. Everybody's going to be building something. May not be very fast, but my job is much more portable than a lot of others. I don't know. Oh, yeah, you're going to tell it with you have yours. Well,
we both, I don't know if you noticed PE behind our name. I don't I don't usually walk around and saying I'm Jenny Lamb PE, but as professional engineer, for those of you that are going into engineering, obviously it's something that you can't get until 4 years after you've graduated or after 4 years worth of experience. You usually take your EI or EIT, I don't even know what they're calling it these days, as you're graduating or, within the year of when you're graduating. And then you take your PE. And that's why we both consider ourselves civil engineers, because that's what area we took our professional engineering test in, is civil engineering. And I took my test in 1999. It was like just a little over 4 years after I graduated. And it's not an easy test to pass. It's less than 50% passing rate, I think. There's no shame in taking it 3 or 4 times, because a lot of people do. But I decided, since I didn't have kids at the time, that by God, I was taking it once and I wasn't wasting my time studying again. So fortunately, I passed it with flying colors, but no one asks you what your score is on the PE, even though I'm very proud of mine, but no one asks you that. So they just care if you have it or you don't have it. So Danny's husband, that's a prime example. He does not have his PE, and he doesn't need it. So in some engineering fields, it's not as important to get your PE. And then even in the field of civil engineering, I know a woman I worked with up in Gainesville that she never went on to get hers, but she never had the need to have it for her position. I also know an electrical engineer who he was my parents' age, and when I took my PE, he took his PE, and he took it for the first time. But he was an electrical engineer. He worked for Florida Power and Light, and he was told that if you expect to move up any further in the operation or in the company, you will need your PE. So he went out and got it. And I guarantee you, it was a lot harder for Bill to go get his license than it was for me to get mine, because I was only 4 years removed from college, and he was probably 20 some years removed from college. So if you go that route, I mean, it depends on which field you're in, number one, and if your job needs it or not. But even if your job doesn't need it, unless you're electrical engineering, I would strongly suggest getting it before schooling gets too far away from you.
Yeah, I'm not a test taker. The preliminary exam that we take is the EI. I took it twice while I was in college, and then I took it more after I graduated, and it's given quarterly, or twice a year. We're changing the rules that way. Twice a year. So I had to take the EI 4 times. So that put 2 years of extra studying after I graduated that I really wasn't prepared for, even thought I would have to do. And then when I got around taking my PE, it again took me 4 times. The passing score is a 70, and when you make a 69 3 times in a row, it's very irritating. It's not the same test every time you take it. It's a different test with different questions. In fact, the test that Jenny took is a completely different test than I have, because they've actually rewritten how the test is given. So most of my friends and colleagues that I was working with couldn't even help me study because they didn't have any clue on the test. But that's okay. I'm not a test taker. I admit it. I got my degree. Passed. Thank you. Got my EI. Passed. Thank you. Got my PE. Did that one too. And now I'm done. There will be no more college for me. I can almost guarantee it. I am not a college person. Again, my dad was not very happy with that idea, being a college professor that he was. So I have a younger sister who's got her MBA. He's very excited. But just because you don't do well in school doesn't necessarily mean that you won't do very well in the private sector. So I'm not telling you not to study and not to try to pass all your classes. But it's okay if you struggle with something. You may find that once you get out in the real world, that course that drove you nuts, that didn't make any sense, somebody explains it differently once you get out in the real world, and it makes sense.
And then, we'll open up for questions. I did want to point out too, or ask, or I guess it was asked of us, is women in engineering. Do we find that we think that there's more men or more women? Danny and I have totally differing opinions on this, but it has to do with where she came from. In my opinion, at least at US, it was probably 50-50, males and females. Also in the jobs that I've held, maybe we didn't have 50% women engineers, but in the office where there were other scientists and so forth, they've been well balanced. Everywhere I've worked has been that way. Obviously, becoming city engineer as a woman, I didn't feel that being a woman, it was a barrier for me. But I do remember, and I don't wear that on my, it's not my badge. Oh, I'm a woman engineer. Which I don't take offense to people that do. I did have this woman in my very first job. She was probably about 25 years older than me, and she didn't like the young women engineers coming in because she paved the way for us, and she made sure she told us every time around. And I guess maybe that's part of why my attitude, but I do feel that especially these days, and I say these days, even in like the last 10, 15 years here in Florida, I think that women have a very good chance in engineering and science jobs. I don't feel that old barrier of, oh, only men can be scientists and engineers is there. But Danny has a different story.
I have a different story. Well, I have a unique name, obviously. It's short for Danielle. It's my mother's fault. She called me Danny. Phone call yesterday. No, it was this morning. One of our administrative staff passes me off a phone call. I go, oh, and I go, this is Danny. Can I help you? And he goes, oh, I'm looking for an engineer. I went, well, that's me. Great big long pause. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Well, do you have water available over here? And do you know what the pressure ratings are? And blah, 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 whatever the question was. I get that a lot. Part of it is my name. That's why most of my stuff says J. Danielle on it, so I know people know who I am. But also growing up in Arkansas, there was a much smaller pool of women in engineering and in science. There were much fewer of us. My first job as an intern, I was the only female intern in the state, and there were no other civil engineers that worked for the state of Arkansas that were female. I was it. I caused all sorts of problems when we had conventions and workshops because they'd send us all down to hotel rooms and they go, oh, crap, she's got to have her own room. I mean, you wouldn't think that'd be a problem, but that did become a problem. I moved to Florida and saw a much larger increase of females, but my first two jobs, I was the only female engineer in the company. Yes, they're small firms, but it happens. But as the years have gone by, there are a lot more women in science and engineering. And not that we weren't there before, it's just the mixing of how that population works. So, don't be afraid to try something just because people think you can't do it, because you can do it. I move concrete all the time.
So if you guys have any questions, obviously we related this to engineering in for the city of Melbourne is where we both are now. We both have jobs other places, but be happy to answer any questions. Go ahead.
I have a quick question for you. You said you did traffic and road on 95, the new construction, and I think on the completed part, the city really justifies it's so uneven, and there's 2 to 3 different types of pavement.
I'll answer. This is my favorite answer. That's not within the city of Melbourne's jurisdiction. That would be the SDOT. So, no. I'm joking, all right? I'm not trying to do the pass off on that, but it's very confusing though on who does maintain the roads. And you have city roads and county roads, and then DOT's roads, state highways, and then we even have DOT roads that, I mean, obviously 95 is the state highway, but O'Galley Boulevard, US 1, part of Sarno is DOT roadway, A1A, O'Galley, well, I didn't mention O'Galley. A lot of people do, it causes confusion. Wickham Road runs right through Melbourne, but it runs through Melbourne. It's a county road. But then you get other roads like Croton. I mean, you think of Croton pretty much being encapsulated by City of Melbourne. Croton Road is a county road. It's a very odd system in that regard. As far as we're asking, is it, the justification for the roads not being completely smooth? I don't know, and I would have to call DOT to just make sure that the answer is correct. We have no authority over that. Now, if someone calls and like we are getting a complaint in, we will contact, and it won't just be an email, here's a handoff. We will call and find out the answer. And I suspect that in this regard that, I don't know, are they 100% done? They might be doing a final overlay when the entire section is done. And I do know that when they had that bad accident just south of the Vieira, No, when the one truck semi drove into the back of the other semi, they had to actually do, I think the road was considered complete at that time, and they had to because of the fire and the heat of the fire, it actually melted some of the asphalt, and they had to go in and patch that area. So I don't know if they're going to come back in and overlay that whole section. But a lot of times, and I admit, sometimes in the construction zones, the grade difference, and you wouldn't think, I mean, there probably is, over an inch difference to cross over. But we can find that out. If you want to give me your information, I can find out if that's the final version out there.
And
Okay, that's what I suspected. They weren't done. Okay.
I do know the concrete section up near Vieira was done because of groundwater problems. Because the groundwater is so high over that marsh section, they went with a concrete road base because it's a rigid pavement versus asphalt, which is a flexible pavement. And so that's why they went with the concrete section up through there. It took us a while to figure that one out, but yeah, because the subsoil is so mushy, I know that's a technical term, they went with the concrete because it'll have a longer life cycle. They won't have to be up there repaving because it'll groove it out with the truck loading.
They're also talking about using concrete in the section of Sarno Road. Sarno Road from Wickham Road out to where it ties into O'Galley Boulevard is actually a DOT road, and they were adding a turn lane, and they were widening that section, and the project sort of has stalled because they ran into the groundwater problem. The DOT has changed their specifications, and the road base has to be so far out of the water table. And in that area, you think about it, I mean, there's especially that area behind Walmart. It's really low lying there, so they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with the base in that area, and they're talking about going with concrete stretch of road in that area.
What are the city limits of Melbourne? Because I wasn't aware that Melbourne and West Melbourne had different city everything.
Totally separate.
Yeah, I probably deal with most of those on phone calls because I get questions about water jurisdiction all the time I want water. My neighbor has water. Why can't I have water? And I'll go, well, you need to call the city of West Melbourne.
Yeah.
I was looking at a map. You weren't in that meeting today, were you? No. I was looking at a map of West Melbourne's actual city boundaries. I didn't realize how odd it was today. It sort of goes like in this big circle, and there's a big hole of county in the middle. But trying to say, the city of Melbourne roughly runs from, it doesn't go in some areas it goes down to Palm Bay Road. Like, I don't know if you, like where Palm Bay and Derry intersect, that's city of Melbourne. Like the BJ's and the Cracker Barrel are in the city of Melbourne. That Walgreens is in the city of Melbourne. But then there's a stretch, I believe, of Palm Bay in there. Carrabba's is actually located in the city of Melbourne. But then from there, we go up to like about Lipscomb Street we don't go straight across Palm Bay Road. And then we go north, and then you run into, you got Melbourne Village in there. You'd have to look at a map, but it's very difficult. It is very difficult to figure out where the actual boundaries are. Yes, go ahead.
How much do you look at your transcripts? Do you just look for the type of law or the how
You haven't gotten an interview, have you?
Other than mine.
I think that like a first job, you tend to look more at the transcripts and at the grades. If I look at transcripts at this, if someone's applying and it's not their first job, I'll look more at their experience and what they've done up to that point. But I will look at the transcripts more to see what courses they had, to see where their strong suits are or where they've had education in. But like I personally tend to give more weight to what jobs they've done and what their experience is in. But that's just me. I know other people have looked at, they've looked at me and they've looked at my grade point average, and I've been like, and I can't even tell you what my college grade point average was at this point, but it wasn't a 4.0, I can tell you that much. It was, if I had a 3.0, I was probably right at a 3.0. And I remember them saying, and I'm like, well, I've got 4 years worth of experience, or 2.5, 2.5 or 4. I have 4 years worth of experience. Is it really that important at this point? So I think it's every employer is different. Me personally, and some of the people I know, that it's more the experience that you have. Go ahead.
You take 20 years of construction experience, building products, investment in products, and all the follow-on, to add to a degree at bachelor's. I think that's a pretty smooth.
Well, it depends on where you're looking to go. I mean, to me, I think that construction experience is very worthwhile to have, because the person that has the construction experience don't just know how to put stuff on the plan. They know if you can actually build it or not, which is a huge thing, because there's a lot of engineers that like to just sit at their desks and just they'll design, and they never really watch the project go in the ground. They don't have to manage the project to see it go in the ground. Whereas someone that has that construction experience and then the degree, I think that to me is a much better combination there. Go ahead.
Do you feel like you've gotten more, like, since you've gone so far along your career path, you feel like you've taken on more of a management role? I know the people are more concerned about that. Engineers, like, they actually like to do the engineering, and they don't want to go higher up into the company, like any sort of corporation, I guess.
I'm glad you asked it. Because, in fact, I said I was going to touch on this, and I didn't write it down. I hardly do any engineering anymore. When I actually do engineering, I get really excited, and I know that sounds horrible, but we were trying to figure out a problem on one of our drainage projects, and I ended up sitting down with one of the project managers, and the two of us sat over the plans for like hour and a half or so. We were going through the different scenarios. I'm like, well, what if we do this? And I ended up coming up with a solution. I'm like, I went home and I'm like, I did some engineering today, and I know, but I do, and that gets back to this kindergarten education. I feel like I spend a lot of time doing manager responsibilities, and some of that I don't mind. Some of that is, it's part of it, but that is trouble, I think, with engineers, and a lot of it has to do with personalities and so forth. But I like to term, and I hope I don't offend anyone here, the pocket protector engineers, I really don't think make good managers, because they are more the, let's figure it out on paper, let's do the nuts and bolts of it, and they don't do as well of dealing with the people and dealing with, some of the give and take, and dealing with conflict resolution with regardless if it's with a contractor or with a citizen. And so, yes, I tend to do more management right now. And when I do get to do engineering, I do, it's like, okay, I still got it in me. So that is something to look out for. If doing the engineering is what you really enjoy, and you may try to find yourself a position or try to find yourself a place to work where you don't necessarily have to take on more management duties in order to move up, or if you could become a senior engineer, because that's what you're good at. I actually worked for someone, and I won't say where because you could probably trace it back, but I worked for someone who had been moved up, and he was an excellent engineer. If you had a question about a design, question about how something got constructed, he was the guy to go to. He was not a real good manager. And where he was, they ended up, and it looked like a demotion, but I think he was actually relieved for it, because he was so much better at what he was doing, and he really didn't take much, I think it was less than a 5% pay cut at the time, and he's moved on since then. But like I said, he was probably one of the best engineers I knew, but not a real good manager.
All right, let's give a round of applause to Generation Strong. If you have any other questions for them, please feel free to come up and ask them. Thank you very much for coming. Have a great afternoon.
Sean.
There you go. I have your email address.
Yeah, we'll check it out, but I think what he said too, like I said, they haven't done the final course, they haven't done the final overlay on it. But I don't know, it depends, like, which stretch are you looking for?
I'm looking at the whole stretch from coming from out.
Yeah.
And that will be
It looks like it's done, I think it's done, but I did notice, in fact, I noticed this the other day when I was driving up,